What happens when your closest ally becomes your biggest threat? Canada is no longer asking that question. It's answering it. After years of being America's most reliable energy supplier, Canada is now preparing to flip the switch, cutting off critical gas exports to the US in a move that could cripple entire states. This isn't just retaliation for Trump's relentless tariff threats. It's a declaration of independence. But Canada isn't stopping there. As tensions with the US escalate, Canadian leaders are turning their backs on their southern neighbor and looking across the Atlantic instead. Talks with the European Union are heating up, and a new alliance could leave America out in the cold. Literally. Is this the beginning of a trade war that could shatter North America's economic foundation? Or is Canada finally breaking free from decades of US dominance? One thing is certain. The fallout from this decision will be felt far beyond the border. Stay tuned, because this story is about to change everything. Canada's breaking point. For decades, Canada has been the quiet, dependable neighbor supplying the United States with over 60% of its crude oil, 99% of its natural gas, and 90% of its electricity imports. But now, that reliability is being weaponized. President Trump's aggressive tariff threats, targeting Canadian goods like steel, aluminum, and even energy, have pushed Canada to its breaking point. Canadian leaders are no longer willing to play by America's rules. Ontario Premier Doug Ford has already hinted at cutting off energy supplies to key U.S. states like Michigan and New York, a move that could send gas prices skyrocketing and leave millions scrambling for alternatives. The message is clear. Canada will not be bullied into submission.
We will go to the full extent, depending how far this goes. We will go to the extent of cutting off their energy, going down to Michigan, going down to New York State, and over to Wisconsin.
But this isn't just about tariffs. It's about respect. Trump's suggestion that Canada could become the 51st U.S. state has only fueled the fire, sparking a wave of Canadian nationalism. From grocery stores to gas stations, Canadians are rallying behind Buy Canadian initiatives, determined to reduce their dependence on the U.S.
Forward, and in fact, this recent musings by President Trump has caused an upsurge in Canadian nationalism, which is not part of the Canadian nature that much. People waving the flag more, a whole raft of Buy Canadian initiatives in grocery stores and all different kinds of forms of our economy.
Canada's patience has run out, and its leaders are making it clear. The days of being America's energy lifeline are numbered. But if Canada cuts off the US, who will fill the void? The answer lies across the Atlantic, where a new alliance is quietly taking shape. Turning to Europe, a new alliance in the making. As Canada prepares to sever its energy lifeline to the United States, it's already laying the groundwork for a bold new partnership. European leaders, frustrated with US protectionism and rising energy costs, are welcoming Canada with open arms. Talks between Canada and the European Union are intensifying, and the potential for a historic energy alliance is closer than ever. At the heart of this shift is Canada's vast supply of natural gas and critical minerals, resources that Europe desperately needs to meet its green energy goals. With the US focused on tariffs and trade wars, Canada is positioning itself as Europe's go-to partner for sustainable energy and raw materials. This isn't just a trade deal. It's a strategic realignment that could reshape global energy markets.
The meeting among Mr. Trudeau and the European leaders that since CETA was signed in 2017, trade has increased by more than 60%.
But this pivot to Europe isn't just about economics. It's about sending a message. By prioritizing trade with the EU, Canada is signaling that it no longer sees the US as its only option. European leaders, in turn, are eager to deepen ties with a country that shares their values and commitment to a rules-based global order.
Standing up for Ukraine is also standing up for the international rules-based order that protects us all and has led to extraordinary prosperity these past 8 decades. This is a moment for all of us to continue to stand together, and as friends and partners, it's exactly what we will always do. Merci beaucoup tout le monde.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This growing alliance between Canada and Europe could leave the US isolated both economically and diplomatically. But as Canada looks to the future, the question remains. Can it truly break free from its dependence on the US? Or is this just a high-stakes gamble? The answer may come sooner than anyone expects. A quick favor before we continue. If you're enjoying the content, consider giving this video a like and subscribing to the channel. Over 98% of you watch without subscribing, and hitting that button really helps us out. It's free, easy, and keeps you in the loop for more great videos. Thanks a ton. Now back to it. The high-stakes gamble. What cutting off the US really means. Canada's plan to cut off gas exports to the United States and pivot toward Europe is bold, but it's also a gamble with enormous risks. For decades, the US has been Canada's largest trading partner, with energy exports forming the backbone of their economic relationship. Severing this lifeline could have far-reaching consequences, not just for the US, but for Canada itself. First, there's the immediate economic fallout. While Canada supplies over 60% of the US's crude oil imports, the US is also Canada's largest customer, purchasing nearly 90% of its energy exports. Cutting off this trade would leave Canada scrambling to find new buyers for its oil, natural gas, and electricity. And while Europe is eager to strengthen ties, building the infrastructure to transport Canadian energy across the Atlantic, such as LNG terminals and pipelines, will take years and billions of dollars. In the short term, Canada risks losing billions in revenue and destabilizing its own energy sector. Then there's the question of retaliation. The US isn't likely to take this move lying down. President Trump has already shown a willingness to escalate trade disputes, and cutting off energy supplies could provoke a full-blown trade war. The US could respond with even harsher tariffs on Canadian goods, from agriculture to manufacturing, further straining Canada's economy. And with the US being Canada's largest export market overall, the ripple effects could be devastating. But the risks aren't just economic, they're political too. While many Canadians are rallying behind the idea of reducing dependence on the US, others are questioning whether this is the right move. Critics argue that Canada's energy sector isn't ready to make such a dramatic shift, and that the government is gambling with the livelihoods of thousands of workers. Provinces like Alberta, which rely heavily on energy exports to the US, could face significant job losses and economic instability.
First of all, I note that when you talk about cutting off energy exports, Alberta exports more than $127 billion. That would be 56% of all of the oil that the United States imports, double that from Mexico, Saudi Arabia, or Iran if you were to combine all of that. So when you look at that amount, is that even realistic to cut off, say, Alberta's energy exports to the United States?
I certainly don't think it is realistic, and nor do I think that that would make us a very good neighbor, quite frankly. I have a little bit of a difference of opinion with my Ontario counterpart, and maybe it's because we are the principal supplier of oil and gas to the United States.
On the other hand, supporters of the move see it as a necessary step toward Canadian sovereignty. For years, Canada has sold its energy to the US at a discount, allowing American refineries and companies to profit while Canadian workers and industries struggle. By diversifying its trade partnerships and focusing on Europe, Canada could finally break free from this cycle and take control of its own economic destiny. And there's another factor at play: the global energy transition. As the world moves toward renewable energy, Canada's vast reserves of critical minerals like lithium, cobalt, and nickel are becoming more valuable than ever. These resources are essential for electric vehicles and green technologies, and Europe is eager to secure a reliable supply chain. By aligning itself with Europe's green energy goals, Canada could position itself as a leader in the global energy transition, leaving the US behind in the race for sustainability. This gamble is as much about the future as it is about the present. Canada is betting that it can weather the short-term pain of cutting off the US in exchange for long-term gains with Europe. But with so much at stake, economically, politically, and diplomatically, one question looms large. Will this bold move pay off, or will it backfire and leave Canada worse off than before? The answer will depend on how quickly Canada can pivot to Europe and whether it can withstand the inevitable backlash from the US. A brewing economic storm. The US has long relied on Canada as its primary energy supplier, but President Trump's recent threat of a 10% tariff on Canadian oil has sent shockwaves through the industry. For Canada, this isn't just an economic challenge. It's a direct attack on one of its most vital sectors. With 97% of Canadian oil and gas exports going to the US, the stakes couldn't be higher. Smaller players in the Canadian oil industry, like Surge Energy, are already scrambling to insulate themselves from the fallout. By selling their oil before the tariffs take effect, they're trying to minimize the damage. But for many, the reality is grim.
Having tariffs is never a good thing, right? Like, this will have a huge blow to Canadians and our economy.
The numbers paint a stark picture. Canada is the fourth largest producer of oil and gas in the world, and 60% of the oil and gas consumed in the US comes from Canada. This interdependence has always been a cornerstone of the two nations' relationship. But now, with tariffs looming, that relationship is on the verge of collapse. The impact won't just be felt in Canada. US refineries, particularly in swing states like Minnesota and Illinois, are bracing for price hikes of up to 75 cents per barrel. These increases could ripple through the economy, driving up gas prices and fueling discontent among American consumers. Even US lobby groups, like the American Petroleum Institute, are urging the Trump administration to reconsider.
U.S. needs Canadian oil too.
The refineries will have to jack up prices if tariffs go on that oil. It could be 50 or 75 cents a barrel, and particularly the Midwest refineries in Minnesota and Illinois and some of those swing states would be most likely to increase prices.
But Canada isn't sitting idly by. Ottawa has made it clear that everything remains on the table when it comes to countermeasures. Including oil in Canada's retaliation strategy could deal a devastating blow to the US economy, making it a tool too powerful to ignore. This brewing economic storm is about more than just tariffs. It's about leverage, power, and the future of North American trade. As Canada weighs its options, the question remains: will this escalating trade war push both nations into economic chaos, or will cooler heads prevail before it's too late? Canada's bold move to cut off gas exports to the US and pivot toward Europe is more than just a trade dispute. It's a seismic shift that could redefine global alliances and reshape the balance of power in North America. But with so much at stake, the future remains uncertain. Will Canada's gamble pay off, or will it backfire and plunge both nations into economic chaos? Can the US afford to lose its most reliable energy partner, or will it be forced to back down? And as Canada strengthens its ties with Europe, could this be the beginning of a new global order that leaves America behind? The answers to these questions are unfolding in real time, and the consequences will be felt far beyond the border. One thing is certain: the stakes have never been higher, and the fallout from this decision could change everything. If you want to stay ahead of the story and uncover the truth behind these high-stakes decisions, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell. The world is watching, and so are we. Don't miss what happens next.